I'll kick things off by just letting all of our panelists take a little bit of time to introduce themselves, the projects they're working on, and how that affects privacy and compliance. And then we'll jump to some questions from there. So I'll start with you, Bilal.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Bilal. I've been an entrepreneur for 10 years. Lately, I've been involved in Zaiffer. We are actually the first product that is building on top of ZAMA's technology. And we're basically providing a privacy confidential layer on top of existing apps. So you basically can land on Morpho with privacy and swap on Uniswap with privacy features.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cohen. I'm Chief Legal Officer at Centrifuge. I'm also Chief Compliance Officer at Antoine Funds. We're an RWA tokenization platform with about four different regulated funds through Antoine launched on the platform, about $1.3 billion in AUM. I'm really more of a user for compliance products rather than producing anything ourselves. So I'll give you a little bit different perspective.
And hello, everybody. I'm Antoine. So I'm in charge of business development at ZAMA. I'm a specialist in cybersecurity and privacy usually. And so at ZAMA, we are a privacy protocol. We enable you to program the level of confidentiality you want on-chain for your DeFi activities. And so we are launching on Ethereum mainnet soon, and we'll scale to other networks pretty soon as well.
Is that working? No. Switch up. Hey folks, I'm Auryn, founder of Notice Guild and Enclave. I guess we're a bunch of access control and privacy nerds building a whole bunch of different protocols and projects around the Ethereum ecosystem. Primarily here representing Enclave, which is a protocol for confidential collaborative compute. Pre-production now, looking to go into production early next year, but really dealing with problem spaces where you're looking to aggregate many private inputs and produce a verifiable output.
All right, thank you all for joining us. So excited to start jumping into, how are we actually going to build privacy-preserving applications? There's lots of different technology stacks that all of our panelists are using. So I'd love to dive into that, but first, kind of going from the talk we just had previously, I'm curious to know what the regulatory environment looks like for some of you building. We do have a legal officer here, so Eli, I'd love to start with you. What are some of the most common misconceptions or just different topics that are coming up with regulators that you're speaking with now?
Yeah, I think as you pointed out very, very clearly in your previous talk, there's a lot of movement in the US and a lot of people are very excited about a lot of the things that the SEC is doing or talking about. But I think one of the common misconceptions is that most of that has not actually happened yet. So we don't, even the Genius Act, which has passed, is not implemented into law. It's not effective yet. You can't actually go get a license as a stablecoin issuer. People call their stablecoins Genius Act compliant, but that's not true. There's no such thing yet. So, people like to skip ahead a lot in crypto where they see a headline and assume that thing has happened, but that thing hasn't happened yet in the US. It is definitely happening, but where it ends up in the end will be probably a little bit different than what people are thinking it's going to be like now, as you pointed out with the Clarity Act and the market structure bills in the Senate. So, for the builders who want to build something right now, it still makes sense to us, from a Centrifuge perspective, to build offshore. We started building in BVI and Cayman back in the previous U.S. administration, where you really didn't have any other choices. And we continue to think that's probably the path forward, at least in the short term, because even if all those SEC changes take place and everything works out exactly as everybody in crypto hopes, we still have a lot of tax issues in the U.S. which are not going anywhere, and that makes things building a tokenized fund in the U.S. can be done, but there are a lot of tax consequences for not just the issuer company, but all the investors too. So not everybody loves to fill out W-8 forms, W-8 Benny forms. We found that out a bit the hard way ourselves when we launched our first pools on Centrifuge in 2021. And everybody had to fill out W-8 Ben forms, and they did not like that very much. So, the U.S. is evolving, which is wonderful, and we're all very happy about it, but it's nowhere near finished. It's very much a work in progress. And I think that if you want to build something right now in crypto, it's best still to be offshore.
All right, good to know. Proceed carefully and find a lawyer who's not on the stage. So, Bilal, to you, as you've been building these technologies and now you've got people able to use like DeFi using your stack, is there anything that you've been able to do around or rather provide to customers or help to work with customers that need to do some sort of auditing or compliance on systems that are private for them by default, but might need to still reveal things to a regulator, an auditor, things like that?
Yeah, no, I'll also refer to your very good presentation before. There is this balance. You mentioned the balance between the privacy and the compliance aspect. I often refer this issue as a trilemma, actually. I would add the user experience. You cannot have, it's really hard to have very sleek user experience while having privacy. And if you have full privacy, you have really bad user experience. So there's this trilemma where you need to find the right balance between the privacy, the compliance, and the user experience. I think the approach that we had is centered around our clients. So what do our users that are liquid funds deploying capital, foundation selling tokens, what are they looking for? And basically, there's one thing that they don't want to compromise on is the ability to do an AML. Because if you cannot do that, you're de facto blacklisted. And I often like to do a counter parallelism with what we do with mixers. Because mixers like Tornado Cash, they cut the link between the sender and the receiver, and they don't hide the amounts. And so cutting the link between the sender and the receiver makes the AML even harder. So that's why I think Tornado Cash was disliked by the regulator, and we're trying to do actually the opposite. So we're not trying to hide the sender and the receiver or to cut the link between the sender and the receiver, only hide the amounts. And if you do that, then the challenge for a regulated entity or for our clients who need to respect regulation is not on the audit trail, but it's just on having the ability to decipher the amounts. And I've seen a lot of privacy solutions. They've implemented those viewing keys, basically allowing a user to delegate to a third party the ability to verify a subset. So in an example where I would want to off-ramp some money from an exchange, I would only have to prove where the money I'm looking to off-ramp comes from, not the rest of my wallets. And so we think this is kind of the right balance because you cannot live in a fully private world because there are obligations from regulated entity, but you don't also want everybody to see. So I think the right middle ground is allow someone to see only what he needs to see to serve the service you want to pay for, basically. And that's the path we're following.
Any additional thoughts on compliant confidentiality on chain? All right, then we'll keep it moving. So, all right, so now we do have a privacy stack that has essentially evolved very far since maybe the initial days of Zcash and kind of the initial experimentation with using ZK cryptography, MPC, and now we have other things like homomorphic encryption, TEEs. So now there's like all these options out there. So I know, Auryn, you guys have had like a lot of different technologies you're building together with Enclave. It seems like you're trying to kind of have like almost all of it, ZKP, MPC, FHE. So with all those acronyms, like how are you kind of like able to get the best privacy by combining a lot of these different methods, and anything that's like key to call out in developments we've had recently?
Yeah. Okay. Is this working now? Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, so we do have a bunch of acronyms mashed together, kind of a novel combination of cryptographic methods and economic guarantees as well. Really, this is I guess a practical choice in order to get the combination of guarantees that we're looking for. And I think the way that we've started thinking about this is with another trilemma. This essentially, you have three properties: privacy, verifiability, and the ability to aggregate information, right? And so we're particularly interested in these aggregative use cases where you want to have some kind of shared secret state, where you want to manipulate some shared secret state. With these three properties, you essentially can choose any two of them, and you must make a compromise on the third, right? That third property has to have a compromise in some way. And so in our case, confidentiality is essentially where we make the biggest compromise. What I mean by that is that we choose to use a threshold committee, so MPC, one of these acronyms, is the thing that ultimately secures privacy. But in doing so, we're able to get verifiable aggregations with economic guarantees around security. And so I guess just to quickly talk through the other acronyms there, ZKPs, zero knowledge proofs, allow us to have kind of end-to-end verifiability on the protocol. FHE gives us this wonderful property of being able to compute over encrypted inputs, kind of arbitrarily compute over encrypted inputs. MPC lets us broadly distribute trust in the keys that control the decryption of those inputs or the outputs, and then a system of economic guarantees allow us to have very strong trust that only the authorized outputs of a given computation will be decrypted. And so yeah, it's a mouthful. It's a mashup of kind of novel cryptographic techniques, but ultimately is in service of an outcome of enabling a kind of best-in-class solution to this category of problems.
Awesome. A nice multi-layered sandwich. So going to you, Antoine, like FHE is something that ZAMA has been focused on, and that's kind of like the more up-and-coming methodology that we've seen a lot of people get excited about. It seems like there have been some breakthroughs in terms of scaling, so I'd love to hear more about like what have been recent developments with FHE or fully homomorphic encryption, and like what are some things you're seeing like ZAMA or others unlock with that?
Yes. So yes, as Auryn said, FHE is the capability to compute over encrypted data, and it's it's been in progress for decades actually at the at the cryptographic studies, and it used to be considered as a holy grail because of this property to compute encrypted data. So what made it possible to get to pragmatic or practical cryptography with it is first you have a progress with the encryption scheme. So typically TFHE, if I talk about what ZAMA is using, TFHE is a new way or a better way to manage the noise needed to encrypt and manage the data when you do the computation. So you have this first phase where the scheme that you're using has been improved drastically, so the performances are suddenly interesting. To give you an example, since ZAMA was created 5 years ago, this increased by 100x the performances of computation over encrypted data. So it's the first step to reduce the computation needed to get a result. Then you have the second layer, which is hardware acceleration, because obviously you need to run the computation on a computer. So if you design specific computers to fit with FHE requirements, and this is what some teams are doing internally or with teams like Optalysis and others, you can expect CPUs, GPUs, FPGA, and ASICs to have new designs fitting with the performances and the computation of FHE. And so here you have a new multiplier. We expect again to gain, to reach levels of thousands of TPS thanks to that. Today we can already get to 20 TPS on GPU, I think, and you can parallelize as well the server, so you can improve that. So that's the second level. And the third level is obviously how to be practical, make it easy for developer. At the end of the day, if you use Solidity to create a smart contract, if most of DeFi is using Solidity, then bring FHE on Solidity and developers are happy. And that's what we are doing.
Yeah, if I can add a little bit of stuff, because we're one of the first guys building on top of ZAMA. So honestly, we've been quite impressed with what the technology can do. Typically, what I really love is seeing this technology applied to L1s directly. That doesn't create an L2 like some of the ZK technology approach, and that's amazing. So you're on Ethereum, you don't have to bridge, and you're enjoying privacy. And I think that's one of the killer feature of fully homomorphic encryption. Another thing that I love is that since it's native to Ethereum, you can use any wallet to manage like confidential token based on FHE. So you can use your MetaMask wallet natively, you can use your Fireblocks wallet natively, all the wallets basically from the Wallet Connect SDK, your Coinbase wallet, So in terms of user experience, it's really amazing compared to what you can see in the market. Another aspect that I very much love with FHE is that compared to ZK, and I've seen some people, for example, Euler, having some ZK pools to have private pools, but ZK doesn't allow composability. And in DeFi, we love to compose. You know, we deposit, we get some LP token, we leverage them, we go deposit there,
You can't
we go
yield farm without it.
lend exactly. And that's another. There's only killer fish with FHE, but the composability is just amazing. And we're doing some experiments where you can, like create loops, famous loops that we love in DeFi. And I was also quite surprised because coming from an engineering background, 5-6 years ago, we were hearing about FHE and we're like, oh, that's the holy grail of cryptography, but doesn't sound possible to make it work. And the ZAMA team has been doing a tremendous job bringing that to production. And a lot of people, they're still saying, oh, scalability. But I mean, like Antoine said, we're already supporting 20 transactions per second, which is more than Ethereum, which is the chain where there is 80% of the liquidity. So, I mean, actually, it's good enough to start. So, very excited with this new revolution.
Awesome. I guess a final question I'll open for the rest of the panel on this topic is, do we see ourselves going towards like a single technique like FHE, or do we still think there's going to be a combined approach to like mitigate trade-offs?
I think it's almost certainly going to be a combined approach. The FHE alone does not solve a problem, or doesn't solve a large class of problems, because you still have to trust something to hold the decryption keys. If you want to use FHE in a blockchain environment, you probably want some form of verifiability. And so FHE alone doesn't provide those properties. And so a combination of FHE alongside of MPCs, or potentially of TEs, of ZKPs, is what's going to give you the collection of properties that you want to actually enable legitimately interesting blockchain systems.
I'm currently working at Turnkey doing verifiable cloud, or we're just now opening that up generally. So it's good to hear that we're still going to be relevant in the future, even as the cryptography scales.
But yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's a multi-layer approach. MPC is very well fitted for key management system. TEs are the backbone as well, but they can't be trusted to some extent. So you need to add cryptography layers on top of this and trust the mathematics instead of the hardware and the access to the hardware. And then ZKPs are super useful for verifiability. So depending on your use case, at the end of the day, you have to understand these tools, which are now affordable and manageable, and design your own solution with it. But it's not a one-size-fits-all type of technology where even we were saying holy grail for FHE, it's holy grail for computation over encrypted data. It's not for key management system.
I was just going to say, I think that, I think the regulators are going to have a big role in determining what sorts of systems are going to be the most adopted and what sorts of systems are going to be the most used. The ones that sort of, the regulators begin to sign off on are going to be the most helpful for those in the industry or those in TradFi who build in a regulated environment. And until the regulators sort of adopt and agree an approach, and there won't be a single approach for sure, that's going to be, a big factor in how this whole, all the innovation develops.
No, for sure there will be multiple solutions, but I think one solution will probably have 80% of the usage, because otherwise the liquidity would be like too fragmented. But in this first phase, short term, obviously there's like so many different solutions that are competing. One of the initiatives that I think is clever, that ZAMA and Open Zeppelin have been doing, it's what they call the confidential token association. So basically they created a confidential standard, and it's not just based on their technology. There is Aztec that is joining. So the idea is that all privacy solutions respect kind of a standardized interface, so that we don't all compete against each other for wallet integration or fintech integration, etc. And I think this brings a healthier competition. because otherwise it's just the person that has the best network that gets integrated into Fireblocks and just capture 80% of the volume. So I think it's a fair playing field, and that will allow, I think, more adoption on the privacy topics, and then we'll see who the winner will be.
Yeah, no, I'm very much looking forward to seeing standardization, and having spent a lot of time at Open Zeppelin, it's very bullish to see that you're all working with them as well. Thanks. All right, I think Bilal, I'll come back to you because Eli, I wanted to talk more about the real world adoption and use case. So you've talked a bit about like, okay, the regulators are definitely going to have a big role in like how the broader institutional adoption looks like. But like as Centrifuge has been working more with some of these institutions that are going to care about what regulators think, they're going to be like much more top of mind for them. Like how have you been balancing that in terms of like, what do you, maybe we could hear more about what Centrifuge actually does in practice, but I'm curious to know how the transparency and confidentiality like balance is typically done for institutions, and how Centrifuge is balancing that.
Yeah, it's been a challenge, I would say. I think that probably the biggest challenge we had was we launched a S&P tracker fund about 6 weeks ago, and the sort of the data protection requirements from S&P are really quite substantial. They don't want anybody to be able to see sort of the underlying S&P index. That's their intellectual property, that's their data, that's their entire business, really. So they very jealously guard that IP, and you need to get a somewhat expensive license from them to be able to distribute it, even to be able to use it. So we basically had to create a segregated section of our app for that one fund in order to gate the information that you would normally see in other funds that we have tokenized and launched on our platform, which have a NAV that is visible for everyone, for the general public, which have underlying assets that are visible for everybody. But the S&P, we cannot do it that way because that's just was one of their requirements. So it's always been a balance. It's going to continue, obviously, to be a balance. And I think that the launch of additional index products in tokenized form creates a second layer of third-party requirements, not just the issuer requirements, not just the regulator requirements, but also the index data provider requirements. So there's like a series of 3 different level requirements that we need to be able to implement on our platform in a way which protects not just the compliance requirements that the fund itself needs, or the compliance requirements that the regulator of the fund needs, but also the compliance requirements of the data provider for the index itself. So it's there's a lot of steps in the process and a lot of negotiation in the process, especially when we were dealing with S&P, they didn't have a lot of understanding of exactly how blockchain technology worked, and they didn't like the idea of having their data on a public blockchain, obviously. So they wanted to be super careful. And I think maybe the space will evolve and people will get more comfortable with this. And hopefully a lot of the data privacy innovation that everyone here on the panel is working on will help. And the regulators will agree to use a number of those, or at least some of those innovations, in order to allow our tokenization platforms like Centrifuge to do this in a way which is better from a technology standpoint.
So I had not considered like the people that monetize data actually caring about privacy on chain, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, very much.
If I may, I mean, there is this misconception that privacy is like only cypherpunk type of activity, but institutional businesses are super demanding for this, because businesses typically run on privacy, and if you don't have private information, you don't get an edge against competition, you don't get an edge in benefit of your clients. And so regulated businesses have the need of privacy. So you can't get them on chain and get all the liquidity you would like on chain without privacy. That's a blocker today.
That's right.
Yeah, I guess generally for everyone, just as the kind of rubber meets the road of like when you're putting this to production, what are other things that come up that you wouldn't necessarily think about when it comes to like implementing privacy on chain? Maybe starting with you, Auryn.
Yeah, I mean, so web pre-production is a bit of a speculative answer here, but I think the biggest thing from our side is obviously, again, mashing together a handful of pretty novel cryptographic methods. And so it's, I think, necessarily going to be a slower rollout because it's going to take time to prove that these things actually work as advertised, that they work in an adversarial environment. To build confidence, to build a Lindy effect, to put it out in the wild and have people attempt to attack it and break it and all that good stuff. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge. And then I think we've mentioned a couple of times here this kind of benefit of composability, and that even with FHE is difficult and has some compromises, right? If you want composability between shared state, then it implies having kind of persistent shared state over time, which has some implications on your committee design or your protocol design. And so, yeah, I think there's going to end up being a diversity of opinions and of implementations here that give different, I guess, classes of composability, different levels of composability. And so, yeah, I guess like triangulating on what is the right set of compromises, what is the right I guess, level of persistence of state, it will almost certainly be different to what we're currently used to in dealing with EVM. And so, just I guess triangulating again on that optimal point.
I would also say that in our fund space, in our tokenized fund space, the service providers that need to get access to some of the information, like our fund administrator, which is a regulated function in BVI, they don't have a lot of technology expertise. I mean, they do everything on spreadsheets. So until they're able to actually use these tools, it's going to be very difficult for us to be able to adopt the tools unless we have some sort of translator program for them in order to, I mean, we would love to be able to adopt the tools, but until they can adopt the tools, we have to build a translator for them, which is an extra step, again, in order to be able to use the kind of tools that we would like to use in a tokenized fund atmosphere.
Yep, there reminds me a lot of the time when we talk to institutions, we're like, here's how JSON RPC works, here's how you access, and they're like, great, where's the REST API? Like, that's what I'm actually looking for.
Where's the website?
There's many ways of answering this question, but without being too much technical. Obviously, the technical aspect, you can think of, where does the funds transit? Does malicious funds would transit within the privacy contract or not? So you have those questions that are more linked to how do you properly do AML after. You have another thoughts from institutional that I would like to share, because I think it's very important, and sometimes I'm like, what is the market doing? Because it seems to go on an opposite direction from what the users want. So my example is the following. Basically, discussing with institutions, it happens that they don't like ZK. Why do they don't like the ZK? Because ZK is a technology that executes on the client side. So basically, what does it mean? It means that if a user is able to hack the ZK algorithm, he can double spend and do whatever he wants without any, telemetry or how do you say, last line of defense from the financial institution who are managing ledgers, basically. And that's where FHE has a play, because FHE is server-side. So just like in ZAMA, you have a bunch of nodes that synchronize and manage the decryption. And that's kind of an architecture that institutional are more familiar accepting. So that's a key example. So yeah, I'm surprised of the excitement of the whole ecosystem towards ZK, even though institutionals almost blacklist ZK technology when they do an RFQ, basically.
And so it's really comes down to having, even though they're not necessarily able to access user data, just having that control of the stack feels more comfortable.
Exactly. So well, alpha that I share. And another alpha that I share, if I may, because last week I was with Centrifuge CEO in New York, and we were discussing about, because I was telling her, oh, RWA feels a little bit like the privacy. There was a first wave of RWA, but didn't really work out. And then there were a second phase that worked, and we were wondering, and it's the same for privacy. I mean, ZK Monero, Zcash has been here for a long time, and we were wondering of what's the inflection point, what made RWA sexy? And she told me, I think RWA became sexy because when the global economy turned upside down, interest rates went up, and so people were interested in investing in T-bills. And the crypto investor didn't want their crypto to be sold to invest in T-bills and get taxed, basically. They wanted an on-chain T-bill product. And RWA, it worked because of tokenization of T-bills at the right moments. And so we don't have the answer yet, but the idea is to understand what are the Goldilocks conditions that could make privacy work. I think it will go through very specific product that is adapted to the timing.
All right. Well, with that, I think as we're coming kind of close to time, I wanted to ask everyone, what are your predictions if we had the same conversation next year? Or maybe even a little further out than that, whatever you think timing is. But what are some things you're looking at in the time horizon that you think are going to be really interesting that people should keep their eye on? Let's start with you, Bilal.
I want to be super bullish because I'm a founder. And I want to say that our privacy is going to unlock so much liquidity because institutional, whether they're funds, whether they're corporates doing trades, they obviously need privacy. So that's definitely the cap that we are following. But in reality, there's so much competition, which doesn't help the users to choose. And also, when it comes to privacy, nobody wants to be first to try. Everybody agrees in the needs, but nobody wants to be first to try. So who's going to be the inflection point? I don't know. In crypto, there's definitely growing needs. So I'd like to say it would take 1 to 3 years to have, I don't know, maybe 30%, 20% of the current TVL private.
All right, that's promising.
Yeah. I think as a prediction, there's going to be, maybe not next year, but maybe the year after or the year after that, there's going to be some very savvy regulator that's going to pick up on these tools and start to really understand them and adopt them for their market. And it's going to be a game changer for everybody in crypto. It's going to be a game changer for a lot of the people in this space. Maybe it's going to be the ADGM in Abu Dhabi. Maybe it'll be SEMA in Cayman. Possibly the MAS in Singapore, but probably not. It's going to be a regulator like that has the resources and that has the technology expertise and that really wants to capture a whole bunch of market share. And it's going to make a really big difference. And there are going to be a lot of people moving to that jurisdiction.
For me, I think the biggest inflection point will be when privacy is really transparent as well. It's a UX issue. We haven't talked much about it, but how to say, practicality or just being simple to use is an enabler. And as soon as you can, transact anywhere with shielded transactions in a simple way, it will grow dramatically. It's like HTTPS for HTTP. In just a decade, you went from 1 to 3% of the web being encrypted to 90 and more. And for the user point of view, nothing changed.
Yeah, I gotta give a shout out, I think, to the Railgun folks on that point, right? Just radically improving UX for private transactions. I think one prediction is just that, is Railgun, privacy pools, these kind of protocols will see a huge wave of adoption over the next year. I think the other prediction for the next year is just products like Enclave, like ZAMA, that are again doing this mashup of cryptographic methods to really enable these collaborative use cases. You'll see a few of these come into production and really start to test the boundaries of again UX compliance and really again start to triangulate what that optimal trade-off point is. And then I think slightly longer term prediction, I'm really excited about IO as a third acronym to throw into that mix, or fifth acronym to throw into that mix. Indistinguishability obfuscation, for anyone that's not familiar. This is completely impractical currently, but offers some really, really interesting affordances to add on to that stack later on.
All right. My final one is I hope that by same time next year, especially because it'll at that point be coming after midterms in the US, is we have some statutory protections for developers to build privacy tools in the US, and we can bring more of that onshore. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all the panelists for joining us.